Hi, welcome to another edition of Fleet Momentum video series produced by Automotive Fleet. I'm Fleet Group Editor Chris Brown. This series is designed to put a spotlight on key leaders, trends, and product offerings in the fleet management industry. This episode is sponsored by and produced in partnership with BTC Power. Here, I interview Stephen Israel, Senior Director of Product Management for BTC Power. We'll talk about EV charging infrastructure and what fleets need to think about to properly maintain their EV chargers, as well as the keys to making sure those chargers stay up and running. Hey, Stephen, Will, welcome to this edition of Fleet Momentum video series.
Thanks for having us on.
Why don't you just dive in? I just want to get first at like the concerns in terms of making sure these chargers actually remain in service.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I think to start kind of we BTC over at BTC Power, where we build EV chargers. We've actually been established since 2001. We built our first DC charger actually in 2010. So we've got a wide variety of experience that even ranges before kind of the e-mobility sector even took off, starting with actually oil and gas. So kind of our core competency is not just in EV chargers, but actually in maintenance and services of key mobility sector and even payment systems and other complex kind of IoT kind of applications. Great question, kind of related to kind of, the post installation, kind of keeping a charger up and running. What do you need to do that? Kind of how the way I like to break that down with our customers, because we have a very consultative sell, is kind of breaking it down into three different sectors. First, you have these devices are all IoT devices, right? They're connected via cellular modems, they're connected via Ethernet, but effectively they're going up to a cloud-based operating system. And with this, you really need to make sure you have 24/7 monitoring, call center supports, things like this to really support kind of the back-end operations. There's a lot of things that, the user on the site will be able to see themselves, but there's a lot of applications kind of and errors and faults in different states that you can actually proactively react to even before somebody even sees this on site. So that's the first thing, is kind of being proactive and kind of monitoring what's happening with these devices. The next thing is once something does happen, it could be as simple as a connector kind of getting run over. It could be more complex, like, the charger actually getting hit, or something related to like the internal workings of the device. You need to actually correct the problem. So the next thing would be, preventative and corrective actions. So you could do this in a couple different ways. BTC in our application and the way we do the service and maintenance, we do it a couple different ways. We can allow the customer or our partner to do the maintenance themselves. And we can go into a little bit of depth later kind of on how we have that program set up. Or two, we can actually do the service and maintenance ourselves to kind of take the burden off of our customer. And then lastly, and sometimes even kind of just as important as the service and maintenance, is making sure that you have adequate parts supply to be able to do the corrective action. So I think, as a lot of your the people that are listening to this are aware of, with the supply chain crisis, you could have had a problem that could be as simple as, a little more complex than a fuse, but even an MCU or something that's happening in the vehicle, and they've been waiting months to kind of get these replaced on some of their fleets. So making sure that you have an adequate supply of parts. There's a couple different ways in which we can do this. One, you can make sure that the service provider has the adequate supply of parts to be able to supply those in less than 24 hours, because you want to get these parts in hand as soon as possible. Or two, for some of our larger customers, we set up they can purchase inventory and hold inventory of the most common parts to fail. Keep cold or warm stocks of those parts on hand, so that they could get these assets up and running as fast as possible, as these are required for their equipment to continue to operate.
Okay, great. Yeah, well, that's a great in-depth dive there. You kind of teed up the next question. I mean, what is a maintenance plan as it relates to chargers? What does that typically include?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. Yeah, the next thing would be the maintenance plans. All chargers, not just ourselves, but BTC has a parts warranty on our equipment. So this would be kind of any corrective action that's needed on those chargers that would not be vandalism or such. And this is pretty common throughout the space, ranging from about 1 year to 2 years, kind of on parts warranty. Beyond that, there's a variety of other services that can be provided. Some of them are kind of what we talked about, the monitoring services. BTC, the way we offer it is we actually have a remote support system. This can be where we do 24/7 kind of monitoring. We can actually take, we have a 24/7 call center support. So if you do have a problem, you can call in. We will actually even do a triage and then give back corrective actions if the customer is actually doing the services themselves. And then once they're on site or their technician is on site, they can call back into the call center to get support on making sure they complete the activity as expected to take that asset back into operation. We offer a very consultative kind of approach and sell. We're very happy to kind of sit with the fleet owners and walk through kind of what matches their need best. And this has been a great approach, kind of as people are moving from fossil fuels to more green fuels to even electrification. Kind of they need to kind of get walked through with a little bit more of a white glove approach to make sure that they understand kind of what the mechanics are of the corrective actions, what's different from what they do right now, and even what opportunities they have that they never had before, right?
Yeah, sure. We started to touch on this, but next question would be like, so let's say something breaks down. I mean, what's the process to get it repaired and back up and running?
Yeah, so first, if we're talking about it's not something that's monitored, that we're actively kind of monitoring and correcting on a proactive basis, it would generally come as an inbound call or ticket, right? We utilize a ticketing system via Salesforce, in which we do management of all of those, and we can have APIs that connect into some of the fleets that have larger fleet systems that want to do some connecting into them. But generally, this would come in 3 different ways. Either one, we have an active dispatch tool that we can use on our website. They have a Salesforce portal for some of those that have individual customer portals. And then lastly, we can always take phone calls. We do have a 24/7 call center. From that point, that ticket would be opened and the agent would go into reviewing and remotely reviewing that asset. We would look at logs, we would look at states, we would look at what happened in the previous kind of sessions to likely come to that phone call. We would try to correct that opportunity or that issue if we saw an issue existed, or we would send out a corrective action work instruction, as well as what parts were needed to bring that asset back to operation. Now, that last part is kind of where we can either take the 2 approaches. We can do it ourselves, or we can send that back to the customer or the customer's partner to do those corrective actions themselves.
Okay, great. And this also brings up the question too. I mean, whether it's a piece of technology or a copier or a piece of equipment, what does the fleet manager and the fleet manager's team need to do to maintain chargers internally?
That's a great question. So, we over at BTC, we understand that this industry needs to scale. And what we've done to actually scale is a couple-fold. One, we have a very robust documentation process that's a step-by-step guide, almost like an IKEA instruction set for what you do when you have to replace an individual part. This allows us to give a very comprehensive look to the installer or the service party for what they need to do to bring that asset back to operation. Secondly, what we have a certification program. We offer that over at BTC in our Center of Excellence. And what we do is we bring in outside technicians. We take them through a class that can range from 3 days down as little as 1 day if we're being very specific to a specific hardware set. And we, through instruction, through testing application, we will that technician, if they pass all the activities, would walk away with a certification that would allow them, give them the expertise to operate safely when they're servicing the chargers, which is most important, of course. Make sure that they can correct the issue that exists on that charger, and three, really take a phone call and understand kind of how to communicate well with that support agent on the other side.
Okay, great. Hey, last question. How do you select a charging vendor? How do you go through that vetting process?
And it's a great question. And I think, some of the pieces are exactly what we talked about before, making sure that what you are doing for your fleet and what your fleet needs are really encompassed with that partner that you're looking for. And that comes to the servicing side. That also comes with the hardware selection. You need to make sure that kind of your use case is a match across the board for what your partner and your EVSE supplier is really going to be offering. At BTC, we have a very wide-ranging product offering that ranges from the level 2 side with a very fleet-focused application, all the way up to DC chargers that go from about 90 kilowatts all the way up to 360. Because the fleet operator's use case is very wide, right? Fleet can mean anything from charging, a small pedestrian vehicle or light duty vehicle, all the way up to a class 6 or class 8. And within those different vehicles, you can even have use cases that are looking for 30-minute turnaround to as much as 10-hour turnaround. So you really need to make sure that the charging equipment kind of matches the need, and that there's even the opportunity to kind of take on multiple use cases with even a single asset. So you can be very flexible with the modern technologies that we have.
Okay, great. Well, we really went around the block here, so to speak, on what it's like and what fleets can expect in choosing an EVSE provider, and what that looks like in terms of maintaining these units too. I really appreciate your time today, Stephen. Thanks for being on this edition of Fleet Momentum video series.
Chris, thank you very much. And if anybody's looking to reach out to BTC, you can find us online, and we would be happy to help support you with any of the questions that you have.
Great. Thank you.